Okay, this is the fourth video in our session on how to set up CAC and smart card authentication. And where we're at now is we have everything set up like it's supposed to be with our Trust Store keys, and our smart card login button here is enabled. And what we need to do next is I'm just going to log in here not using the smart card, but I'm just going to log in using the admin user and look in the administrator area. And the goal is, so we have in our users area, we have this person in here with the login name of PYOO. And if we looked at our certificate that we had for our client, let's look in here and just check this out. Certificates. Here's our certificate, our client certificate. And if we view this thing and we look at the details of it, how this thing works is it looks at the subject, and it looks at the subject of the certificate, which is this, and then it is supposed to use first initial last name based on the certificate. So the way it does that is it has to look at what do we call it? What is it called? Let me look here real quick. Yeah, identity transformer. Okay. So what that is a JavaScript that when you log in with your certificate, I'm going back to my certificate here, hopefully. The JavaScript parses through this subject and pulls out the first initial last name. Okay. So by default, it does use first initial last name. And there's a couple different transformers you can pick from, but we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, so the goal is we're going to log in as this person because that's whose certificate it belongs to. So we'll just go back to the login screen, and where these transformers are is in that comp folder that we talked about earlier. And again, we're going to go into this transformer templates. So there's a couple different transformers in here. The 509 JScript one, this is the one we're going to use right now. There's a couple different ones, and you can read about these in the documentation. So what we do, we'll edit this guy, and it kind of talks a little bit about it. But what you want to do is copy this whole chunk, okay? And we are going to put that into our configuration file, which we go back to this folder, edit this guy. And if we scroll down to where we were before for our authenticators, there is another section right here for identity transformers. So if you were to just search for that, you would have found it. And we'll paste this transformer in here. Okay, so if we just look at this real quick, all it is just JavaScript that basically it will build a first initial last name. So one thing I found that's kind of helpful is right here, what it does is it only puts this person's name if your logging level is set to trace right now. So if your logging level is set to trace, it will put an entry in the log. So what I like to do is, just because it's easier, if you do this log.info, it's going to put this, what it's trying to transform, into the log. Okay? Then, if you really want to, you can also copy this, and I was doing it down here. I was putting like username equals username. I'll show you where this comes into play here in a second. So if you just change this JavaScript a little bit, we can kind of debug this a little easier. So we'll have to save that file. Okay, and again, make sure configurator is not running because your changes will get wiped out, and then we will restart JBoss one more time. Let me pause this. I want to delete my logs again just because it's easier. Okay, let me pause this while JBoss restarts and we'll come back. Okay, JBoss is now back up, and let's try again logging in with our smart card username here, which is this card, and see what happens. Now it's going to go out, try to transform things, and I got logged in, and I'm logged in as PYOO. So if I go look at my log, again, this is all in the SSO IDP log. And since we added a couple things to the JavaScript, because we're in the info section here, we can see that it was transforming this CN. So it pulled that part out of the subject, and then based on that, the JavaScript parsed through all of this and ended up with this username. So, gosh darn it. If it wasn't, if this username didn't exist, we would have got a invalid username or password, things like that, normal stuff. Or this may have come back with something that you weren't expecting, like some more characters or something. And so that basically would have meant that the JavaScript that we put into that as the transformer needed to be either tweaked a little bit because your CNN comes back a little differently, or something of that nature. So that would be the good troubleshooting steps for that. So if you want, you can go back and set that back to error for the logging on that transformer, just in case you don't want all these usernames stuck in your log all the time. But so that's basically it. That's now it's now working. And there are other things you can do with the CAC stuff in the configuration guide. It talks about some certificate revocation lists and some other things, but this is the basic gist of it, getting it to work. And hopefully that helps.